She left silent after the broken mating, but minutes later, the Alpha King's carriage came for her. Its towers, black as night and tipped with silver, pierced the sky, and the wind whispered through the cold stone corridors, carrying secrets of the ages. Lyra walked silently along the echoing passage, her footsteps soft but purposeful, each step heavier with the weight of her decision. She had just broken a bond centuries in the making, a bond that the Alpha King, Kale, had been told would unite their fates. Kale's presence lingered like a storm behind her. He had watched her leave the ceremonial chamber without a word, his pride shattered by her silence. The court had been still, frozen in the tension of a prophecy undone, as Lyra had refused the ritual that would have bound their souls. Her refusal was not born from fear, it was born from choice, from the knowledge that surrendering would not grant her freedom, but a life tethered to a destiny she did not wish to claim. Lyra's mind raced as she moved through the dim corridors. The air smelled faintly of candle wax and something older, something almost alive, as if the kingdom itself were watching her. Every shadow seemed to reach for her, and every distant echo of her own footsteps felt like a warning. She knew she could not escape entirely. Kale was Alpha, a being bound to both the throne and the supernatural forces that governed the Moonville kingdom. And now, her defiance had awakened more than just his anger. It had stirred the old powers that slept beneath the castle. The night air beyond the castle walls was cold, carrying the scent of wet earth and frost. Lyra stepped into the courtyard, her cloak flaring like a dark flame behind her. She paused, glancing back at the towering gates she had just left. The moonlight reflected off the silver spires, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to stretch toward her. She felt a tug in her chest, a mix of fear and something else she could not name. She had never been able to ignore the magnetic pull Kale seemed to have on her, even in moments of anger or defiance. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood turn cold. The deep, resonant clatter of hooves on stone echoed through the courtyard. A carriage emerged from the mist, its blackened frame gleaming under the moonlight. It rolled smoothly, almost silently, yet its presence was commanding, unstoppable. Lyra's heart caught in her chest. She knew immediately whose carriage it was. Kale had come for her. She wanted to run, to vanish into the night forest that bordered the kingdom, but her feet felt rooted to the cold stone. The carriage stopped before her with a graceful finality, as if it had anticipated her hesitation. The door swung open slowly, and Kale stepped out. His presence was overwhelming, tall, broad, and wrapped in shadows and moonlight. His eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed on her with a mixture of anger and something far more dangerous, desire. "Lyra," he said, his voice low, smooth, and carrying a weight that made the air between them tremble. "You cannot run from what is already yours, not by choice, not by will." Lyra held her ground, raising her chin, though her heart beat like a drum against her ribs. "I do not belong to you or to this prophecy," she said softly, yet firmly. "You may think the bond is inevitable, but I choose my own path." Kale's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment she saw something she had never seen before, vulnerability. But it was fleeting, masked quickly by the armor of pride and command. He took a step closer, the shadows bending around him as if the night itself obeyed his will. "You think defiance can save you?" he asked, his voice both a challenge and a lament. "The forces that bind us are older than kingdoms, older than life itself, and yet still you try to walk away from what destiny has carved." Lyra felt the weight of his words, and a chill ran down her spine. She did not flinch, but her mind raced. The forest beyond the courtyard was dark, alive with whispers of creatures she could not see. Legends spoke of spirits that roamed the woods, drawn to broken prophecies and disturbed fates. She could feel their gaze, and she knew that fleeing into the forest without Kale would be dangerous, perhaps even fatal. Kale extended his hand, not in command, but as an offer, a lifeline entwined with threat and temptation. "Come with me." There is a way to survive what you've begun, but only if you allow me to guide you." Lyra hesitated. There was a pull in her chest, a longing she could not name. Kale represented danger and temptation, but also a strange comfort. To refuse him fully might save her body, but her heart, she was not so sure. And yet her pride, her need for autonomy, flared brighter. "I will go," she said finally, her voice steady, though it trembled slightly, "but not as your prisoner, not as a pawn in your game. I will follow if it is to protect myself, and perhaps to understand the forces you serve." Kale studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, with a motion as fluid as the night, he turned toward the carriage. The door opened, and he gestured for her to enter. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, sliding into the soft shadows inside. The carriage moved smoothly, gliding over the cobblestones and into the darkness. The walls of the vehicle seemed almost alive, breathing with a faint, cold energy. Lyra felt the tension between them like a living thing, thickening the air. Kale remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed ahead, yet she could feel his awareness on her every movement, every thought. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of hooves against stone and the distant whisper of the forest. Finally, Kale spoke, his voice softer this time, almost hesitant. "You are stronger than I imagined," he said. "Stronger than the prophecy ever accounted for, but strength alone will not save you. Not here, not ever." Lyra's heart thumped, but she kept her voice calm. "Then help me understand. Do not command me. Do not demand my surrender. Let me see the path clearly." Kale's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, and then darkened again with shadows and secrets. "Perhaps," he said, "perhaps that is the one gift I can give you. Clarity if you survive the night." The carriage passed into the forest, where trees arched high overhead, their leaves blotting out the moonlight. Strange shapes moved in the undergrowth, spirits or something older, drawn to the broken bond and the power now awakened in Lyra. She could feel it stirring, a flicker of something within her she had never known, something that hummed with the pulse of the kingdom itself. Suddenly, the carriage jolted. Lyra's hand gripped the edge of the seat as the forest seemed to close in around them. Shadows twisted unnaturally, forming shapes that looked almost human, yet their eyes glowed like fire. Kale's hand moved, and the air around them shimmered with a protective barrier, dark yet beautiful, like liquid night. "They are drawn to you," Kale said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "Your defiance, it calls them, but fear not. I will not let them take you, not while I breathe." Lyra looked at him, and for a moment she saw beyond the king, beyond the Alpha. She saw a man bound by duty, by curse, by the weight of a kingdom older than memory. And though her pride screamed to resist, a flicker of understanding warmed her chest. The carriage emerged into a clearing, the moonlight filtering through the trees like silver rain. Lyra felt the air shift, thick with anticipation and unseen eyes. She knew the journey ahead would test everything, her courage, her heart, and her will. And she knew deep down that the bond broken in the hall was not gone. It lingered like a shadow at her back, whispering promises of power, danger, and perhaps something she had never allowed herself to hope for. Kale's voice broke her thoughts. "We are not safe yet," he said. "But the night is long and the kingdom, it watches. Soon the choice you have made will demand a price, and I fear that when the reckoning comes, neither of us will remain unchanged." Lyra swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. She had walked away from destiny, and yet in this carriage she felt the gravity of it drawing her in, like a tide impossible to resist. She met Kale's gaze and nodded, silently acknowledging that whatever came next, she would face it, not as a pawn, not as a subject, but as herself. The forest seemed to lean closer, the shadows thickening, and a chill swept through the carriage. Lyra's hand brushed against the seat beside her, and though she did not move closer, she felt a quiet connection, a spark between them that neither had expected. And as the carriage rolled deeper into the heart of the Moonville woods, Lyra realized one thing with absolute clarity. She had not escaped destiny. She had only begun to walk its treacherous, moonlit path. The carriage glided deeper into the Moonville forest, the thick canopy above swallowing the moonlight. The trees bent like silent guardians, their twisted branches forming shapes that seemed to watch, to judge. The forest smelled of damp earth and ancient magic, and every rustle of leaves made Lyra's heart beat faster. Though the carriage's protective barrier shimmered like liquid night, she felt the pull of unseen forces pressing in around them, testing her courage. Cale remained silent, his eyes fixed ahead on the winding path. His presence filled the carriage like a shadow made of flesh, both protective and threatening. Lyra watched him, noticing small details she had never dared before. The way his hands gripped the edge of the seat, the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of hesitation behind his otherwise unyielding eyes. He was not just a king or an alpha. He was a man carrying centuries of duty and curse, and she could feel the weight of it pressing on her. "Why do you follow the rules of a prophecy you do not believe in?" Lyra asked finally, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, though she kept it steady. "Why do you allow fate to dictate your life when you are capable of more?" Cale's eyes flicked to her, a shadow of emotion crossing his features before he looked away. "Because," he said slowly, "some chains are not forged by choice. They are older than life, older than kingdoms, and some mistakes, some refusals can cost more than you can imagine." Lyra swallowed. She had already chosen defiance, and yet she could not help but wonder what he meant. "And the cost?" she asked softly. "Is it yours or mine?" Cale's gaze darkened. "Both," he admitted, the word heavy with regret. "Your choice has changed the balance of the kingdom. The spirits that guard this land, the forces that dwell in the shadows, they will not let broken destiny go unnoticed. And you have stirred something inside yourself that even I cannot control." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had noticed it, the flicker of power that had awakened the moment she refused the bond. Her blood had tingled, her senses had sharpened, and the forest had seemed alive with energy at her defiance. She had thought it was fear, but now she realized it was something more. A force older than her understanding, connected to Cale and the prophecy itself, had begun to stir within her. Before she could speak, the carriage jolted violently. Lyra's hands gripped the edges of her seat as the shadows outside writhed unnaturally. Shapes formed between the trees, tall, slender, humanoid, but with eyes like embers and movements that defied nature. They whispered in a language older than time, a sound that scraped against the mind. "They are drawn to you," Cale said calmly, though his hands moved with precision, tracing gestures in the air that made the barrier pulse. "Your defiance is a beacon. The forest spirits, the guardians of fate, they do not forgive lightly." Lyra's pulse raced. What are they?" "Neither living nor dead," Cale replied, his voice steady despite the tension in the carriage. "They are echoes of the old world, guardians of the balance. They are curious, but they are dangerous. And right now, they are hungry for what you carry inside." The carriage lurched again as a shadow lunged at the barrier. Lyra gasped, but Cale's magic flared, a dark shimmer that turned the shadow aside like mist. The figure dissipated with a hiss, and the forest grew silent once more. For a moment, only the sound of hooves and the whispering wind remained. "You must learn to control it," Cale said, his eyes finally meeting hers. "That power inside you, it is linked to the curse that binds me and to the kingdom itself. If you cannot control it, you will be consumed, and I cannot protect you from everything forever." Lyra's hands trembled slightly, though she forced herself to stay calm. "I do not understand," she admitted. "I have never felt anything like this. It's as if the forest itself is alive inside me, moving, watching, waiting." Cale nodded slowly. "Exactly, and that is why I have come for you, to guide you, to help you understand. But even I cannot teach you everything. Some truths, some power must be discovered in the fire of trial." The carriage continued through the forest, winding around roots and stones as if the path itself were alive. Lyra tried to steady her mind, but her thoughts kept returning to Kale, his strength, his command, the dangerous calm in his voice. She hated how her heart fluttered when he looked at her, how her pulse quickened when he moved close. She had come to defy him, and yet, in the confines of the carriage, she could not deny the pull he had over her. Suddenly, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in silvery light. The trees parted, revealing an ancient stone circle at the center, faint runes glowing on the moss-covered stones. Lyra felt the air thicken as the carriage slowed, and she realized with a shock that this was no ordinary clearing. It was a place of power, a site of trials meant to test those who dared challenge fate. Kale's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the clearing. "We stop here," he said. "The spirits of the forest, they will attempt to draw out your strength, test your resolve. We cannot pass without confronting them." Lyra's breath caught. "Test me. Why?" "Because they guard the kingdom," Kale explained. "They guard the balance. Your power is dangerous, not just to yourself, but to everything around you. If you cannot master it, the forest will claim you, willingly or not. And if it does not, something far older, far more merciless will." Lyra looked around at the glowing runes and the shadows moving just beyond the circle. She swallowed hard, her fear and resolve intertwining. "Then we do not fail," she said firmly, though her hands shook slightly. Kale's gaze softened, but only slightly. "No, we do not fail." Together, he stepped down from the carriage, and Lyra followed, feeling the chill of the night against her skin. The air hummed with magic, and the forest seemed to lean closer, curious, waiting. Shapes flickered in the shadows, figures made of light and darkness, moving like smoke, their eyes watching, their whispers pressing against her mind. The first spirit approached, a tall figure cloaked in shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on Lyra. She felt a pull in her chest, a whisper inside her mind, urging fear, urging retreat. She clenched her fists, feeling the power stir within her, a warmth, a light that flickered in the dark. She pushed against the pull, forcing the spirit to stop, the shadow wavering at her strength. Kale moved beside her, his hand brushing hers in a subtle gesture of guidance. "Control it," he whispered. "Do not let it control you." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing, feeling the power flow through her like a river. She reached out with her mind, shaping the force into a shield, a barrier against the spirit. The figure recoiled, its whispers turning into hisses before it vanished into the night, leaving only the faint glow of runes on the stones. One by one, the spirits approached, each testing her strength, her courage, her resolve. Some attacked with shadows, others whispered doubts, others revealed fleeting visions of what could be. A kingdom in ruin, Kale fallen, herself lost to power she could not control. Each challenge forced her to confront fear, anger, and desire, pushing her to the limits of her endurance. Through it all, Kale remained by her side, guiding, supporting, never taking over, but his presence was a constant force, grounding her, challenging her, drawing out the power she had never known she possessed. Each time she faltered, his hand brushed hers. Each time she hesitated, his gaze held hers, steady, commanding, patient. By the time the last spirit vanished, Lyra was trembling, exhausted, yet alive in a way she had never been before. She had faced fear, temptation, and shadows of the mind, and she had emerged stronger, more certain of herself and the power she carried. Kale studied her, his expression unreadable, though a faint shadow of approval passed through his eyes. "You are stronger than I feared and stronger than I imagined," he said quietly. "But this is only the beginning. The forest, the kingdom, the forces that bind us, they are far from done. And so are the trials." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had come to defy fate, to challenge the prophecy, and now she felt its pull more than ever. Yet, amidst the fear and exhaustion, she realized something she had not expected. She trusted Kale. Not blindly, not as a subject, but as someone who had guided her through darkness without trying to dominate her, someone who had respected her strength even as he demanded her courage. The carriage waited at the edge of the clearing, the protective barrier shimmering softly. Kale opened the door and gestured for her to enter. She climbed in, her muscles aching, her heart still racing, yet a spark of determination burned in her chest. As the carriage rolled back into the forest, deeper into the unknown, Lyra looked out at the shadows that seemed to flicker between trees. The spirits had not disappeared entirely. They watched, patient, waiting for the next test. And she knew that the trials would continue, that the journey had only begun, and that the bond between her and Kale, fragile yet undeniable, would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. Kale's voice broke the silence. "The path ahead will demand everything from you," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Courage, strength, and trust in yourself and in me. The forest has only shown you a glimpse of what awaits, and soon you will face a truth that will shake everything you believe." Lyra met his gaze, her heart pounding, her spirit unbroken. "Then I will face it," she said quietly. "Whatever comes, I will not run." The carriage moved onward, into the heart of the Moonville Kingdom, where shadows and secrets awaited, and where the bond broken in the halls had begun to weave itself anew, stronger, more dangerous, and more real than either of them could yet comprehend. The forest behind them thinned gradually, giving way to rocky hills bathed in the silver glow of the rising moon. The carriage moved cautiously, drawn by the faint pulse of magic that emanated from the path ahead. Lyra could feel the forest spirits still watching, their whispers echoing in her mind like a distant warning. The trials were far from over. Before long, the carriage arrived at the edge of a high plateau. At the center stood the Mirror Citadel, a fortress of towering crystal walls that reflected the moonlight in fractured, haunting patterns. Its spires were sharp and tall, catching the wind like silver blades. The runes etched into the stones at the base pulsed faintly as though alive. Lyra's breath caught. Even in the distance she could feel the energy of the place, ancient, powerful, and unforgiving. Kale stepped out of the carriage first, his figure dark against the shimmering citadel. "This is the next test," he said, his voice steady but laced with caution. "The Mirror Citadel does not simply show your reflection. It reveals your soul, your fears, your doubts, your deepest desires, and it tests them. If you falter, it will consume you." Lyra's pulse quickened. She had survived the forest spirits, faced the shadows of the old kingdom, and awakened her latent power. Yet the idea of looking into herself in this way made her stomach twist. "And what if I am not ready?" she asked quietly. Kale's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Then we fail," he said simply. "But failing is not final. It only teaches what must be learned." Together they approached the citadel. The entrance was a massive arch of reflective crystal, shimmering like liquid silver. As they stepped inside, Lyra's reflection rippled unnaturally. At first, it mimicked her movements perfectly. Then, as if it had a mind of its own, it began to twist, showing images of her fears, loneliness, loss, and the consequences of defying destiny. Kale's hand brushed hers briefly. "Do not be afraid," he whispered. "The mirrors will lie, distort, tempt you. You must see beyond their illusions." Lyra swallowed hard. Her reflection shifted again and she saw herself as the world might see her, powerless, small, fragile. Doubt clawed at her chest. I can't," she admitted, her voice trembling. "You can," Kale said, firm yet gentle. "You have already faced the forest spirits and the bond that defied prophecy. That same courage is inside you now. Trust it. Trust yourself." Lyra closed her eyes, drawing in a slow, steady breath. When she opened them, she faced the mirror once more. Her reflection had changed. It no longer taunted her but waited, challenging her silently. She lifted her hand and the reflection mirrored her movement. Slowly, deliberately, she reached toward it. The glass seemed to ripple, and for a brief moment she felt a surge of energy flow between her and the mirror, like a river of light and shadow intertwining. Kale watched closely, his jaw tight, his eyes never leaving hers. She felt the weight of his gaze, steadying yet demanding, a constant presence that reminded her she was not alone in this trial. The reflection shifted again, this time showing Kale, not as he was, but as he could be without the bond that tied him to the kingdom. She saw his loneliness, centuries of isolation, and the endless burden of duty. She understood in that moment why he had demanded her presence, why he had pursued her even after she refused the mating. His heart, she realized, was as bound and tested as her own. "I see you," she whispered, almost to herself. "I understand more than I thought I could." Kale's hand closed over hers, a rare gesture of connection. "Then you are ready," he said softly, "but the mirrors will not stop testing. They will challenge not only your courage, but your trust in me, in yourself, in the bond between us." The citadel shifted. Hallways stretched endlessly, mirrors appearing along every wall. Each reflection moved independently, showing fragments of the past, present, and possible futures. Some mirrored Lyra's fears, her family's absence, the moments she had felt powerless. Others mirrored her desires, freedom, strength, and the possibility of love she had never dared to acknowledge. "Every reflection is a choice," Kale explained. "Face your fear or turn away. Accept the truth or hide from it. And remember, what you choose shapes not only yourself, but the path ahead." Lyra moved cautiously, feeling the floor beneath her shift as though alive. Her reflection multiplied, creating dozens of versions of herself, each with eyes full of doubt, courage, or longing. The air seemed heavy, charged with unseen energy. She saw one reflection step forward, smiling cruelly, whispering, "You cannot control what you feel. You will fail. You are not strong enough." Lyra's heart raced. She wanted to turn, to flee, but Kale's presence reminded her of her power. "No," she said firmly, "I am strong enough." She focused on the warmth inside her, the energy that had saved her in the forest. She reached out again, and the reflection froze, its mocking smile replaced by stillness. The other reflections began to shimmer and fade, leaving only a single version of herself standing beside Kale. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the soft hum of the citadel. Lyra realized she had passed the first trial, fear. But the mirrors shifted again, revealing Kale this time. Shadows of his past danced across the walls, the faces of those he had lost, decisions that had cost lives, the weight of centuries. Lyra saw the loneliness and pain in him, understood the sacrifices he had made. Her heart ached, yet she felt a new respect, a new understanding. "You carry more than any one person should," she said softly. "No wonder the kingdom asks for so much of you." Kale's expression softened, though his eyes remained guarded. "And yet I have survived, because duty demands it, and because some truths cannot be faced alone." The mirrors pulsed again, this time revealing not fears or regrets, but visions of their bond, tentative, fragile, and growing. Lyra saw moments of connection she had not admitted, flashes of unspoken understanding and sparks of something deeper, something neither had yet named. Her pulse quickened. The citadel was testing more than courage now. It was testing their hearts, their ability to trust, to let vulnerability exist without fear. A sudden shift in the floor made Lyra stumble, and she grabbed Kale's arm instinctively. Their eyes met, and in that instant she realized the truth. This trial would not be passed alone. The bond broken in the ceremonial hall was still alive, fragile but undeniable. It demanded trust, and they both had much to learn. Kale's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "We are stronger together than apart. Remember that, Lyra. Trust the bond and trust yourself." Lyra nodded, drawing strength from his presence. "I will," she said, her voice firm, steady. "No matter what the mirrors show, no matter what trials come." The citadel seemed to pulse in response, the mirrors glowing with a soft, silvery light. Shadows receded slightly, leaving the path forward clear. But the air still carried a warning, a promise that the trials were far from over. As they moved deeper into the citadel, Lyra felt a strange calm settle over her. She had faced fear, doubt, and temptation, and had emerged stronger. Kale remained by her side, steady and commanding, yet patient, letting her discover her own power rather than imposing his will. The forest had tested her body, the citadel was testing her mind, her spirit, and her heart. Suddenly, one of the mirrors ahead shimmered differently. A figure stepped forward, not fully formed but unmistakably human. Its eyes glowed like fire and its presence radiated an ancient power. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. This was no ordinary reflection. This was a test unlike any she had faced before, a test of choice, trust, and truth. Kale's hand found hers, grounding her. "Whatever comes, face it," he said firmly. "Together, and do not let fear rule you." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of her power, the strength she had discovered in the forest and the mirrors, and the quiet, steady force of Kale beside her. She stepped forward, ready to face the next trial, knowing that whatever awaited them would test not only their courage, but the bond that had begun to form between them, a bond that was fragile, dangerous, and impossibly real. The figure in the mirror raised its hand, and a voice echoed in their minds. "Do you choose the path of truth or the path of shadows?" Lyra felt her pulse quicken. This was the choice she had been preparing for, not just survival, but understanding, acceptance, and trust. She glanced at Kale, who met her gaze with unwavering certainty. "I choose truth," she said firmly, her voice carrying through the stillness. "No matter what it demands." The figure in the mirror nodded slowly, its glowing eyes softening. The mirrors around them pulsed once more, and the shadows receded, leaving only a clear path forward. Lyra's chest heaved with relief and anticipation. She had passed this trial, but the citadel was vast, and she knew more challenges awaited. Kale's hand squeezed hers gently. "You are learning fast," he said, his voice low but proud. "And we are not done. The citadel will show us more of ourselves and of the bond that fate tried to shatter." Lyra nodded, determination burning in her chest. The mirror citadel had tested her courage, her fears, and her heart. She had survived, and in doing so, she had discovered strength she did not know she possessed, and a connection to Kale that could no longer be denied. As they moved deeper into the citadel, Lyra felt a spark of hope and fear. The trials would continue, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The bond broken in the ceremonial hall had begun to weave itself anew, stronger, more dangerous, and more real than either of them could yet comprehend. The final chamber of the mirror citadel awaited them, a vast hall of black stone and silver light. The walls shimmered with reflections, but these mirrors were different. They did not reflect bodies, faces, or even fear. They reflected destiny itself, a vision of the Moonville kingdom, fractured and trembling, shadows creeping across the land like ink spilled over parchment. Lyra's heart clenched as she realized the cost of their trials. Every misstep, every failure of courage, rippled through the kingdom, leaving echoes that could destroy generations. Kale stepped forward, his cloak flowing like liquid shadow, eyes fixed on the pulsing heart of the chamber. "This is it," he said quietly, his voice heavy with both command and concern. "The source of the curse. The force that has bound me, bound us, and threatened the kingdom for centuries." Lyra swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their journey pressing on her. She had survived the forest spirits, conquered her fears in the mirror citadel, and faced her own inner shadows. But this was different. The chamber radiated a power older than memory, a living force that pulsed with judgment and will. She could feel it pressing against her soul, testing every thought, every desire, every ounce of courage she had left. The center of the hall was a pool of black liquid, still as glass yet moving with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. From it rose a figure, indistinct yet magnificent, glowing with an otherworldly light. Its voice echoed through the hall, a whisper like wind across mountains, yet heavy with authority. "Lyra," it said, "Kale, you have come far. Yet the bond is fragile, your heart's untested. Only through surrender, not of self, but of pride and fear, can the curse be undone. Will you give what is asked, or fall into shadow as all others have before you?" Lyra's hands trembled slightly, but she stepped forward, her eyes meeting Kale's. She saw the same determination mirrored there, the same flicker of fear and longing, the same willingness to face what must be faced. She realized with clarity that surrender did not mean defeat. It meant trust, trust in themselves, trust in each other, and trust in the bond that had grown stronger with every trial. "I am ready," she said firmly, her voice echoing through the hall. "Not to give up, but to face it together." Kale nodded, stepping beside her. "Together," he echoed. The figure pulsed and the black pool rippled. The air thickened with energy, pulling at them like a tide. Lyra felt the force of it, and instinctively her power surged, a bright current of warmth and light intertwining with the darkness. Kale mirrored her, his own power flowing alongside hers. For the first time they moved as one, their energies harmonizing, balancing each other. The figure in the pool shifted, its form flickering between shadow and light. "So, you understand," it said. "You know that the bond is more than blood, more than prophecy. It is choice, courage, and love. Only through unity can the curse be broken, yet it will demand sacrifice nonetheless." Lyra's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on them, the countless lives affected by this bond, the history of the kingdom entwined with their choices. Yet beneath that pressure she felt something else, a quiet strength, a rhythm that pulsed in tandem with Kale's presence beside her. She realized that neither could face this alone, only together could they hope to prevail. Kale spoke, his voice low and steady. "We are ready. Whatever it demands, we face it as one, not as king and subject, not as pawn and prophecy, but as equals bound by choice." The figure in the pool seemed to shimmer, the light around it intensifying. Then it spoke, its tone both warning and guiding. "The trial is now. One act of unity, one surrender of pride, and the curse will break. But if fear or doubt remains, you will fall." Lyra looked at Kale, and in that moment, all hesitation fell away. She stepped forward, placing her hands atop his. The warmth of their combined power surged through them, bright and pure, filling the hall with light. Shadows writhed and hissed as if resisting, yet the strength of their bond held firm, steady as the mountains. "Together," she whispered. "Together," Kale echoed, and in that simple word all barriers of pride, fear, and doubt dissolved. The black pool trembled, then erupted in a wave of energy that washed through the hall. The mirrors shimmered, then cracked and fell away, releasing centuries of trapped power. The darkness fled, replaced by a calm, radiant glow that filled the citadel like the first light of dawn. Lyra felt the pulse of the kingdom itself respond, the forests, the rivers, the mountains, and the people. It was as though the land had exhaled, freed from the shadow that had bound it for so long. And in that moment, she realized that the trials had not been about fear or power alone, but about understanding, courage, and connection. Kale lowered his hand slowly, his eyes searching hers. For the first time since their journey began, he smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You were stronger than I imagined," he said quietly, "and braver than I could have hoped." Lyra's chest lifted, her heart pounding with relief and awe. "We did this together," she said softly. "Not by prophecy, not by fate, but by choice." Kale nodded, stepping closer. The air between them seemed to hum with the energy of their combined strength, yet it was gentle now, no longer pressing or threatening. "Yes," he said, "and that choice, that bond, is stronger than any curse, stronger than any force in this kingdom." The citadel, now calm and radiant, seemed almost alive with approval. The runes along the walls pulsed once, then dimmed, leaving only the soft silver glow of crystal. The mirrors which had tested their hearts and souls reflected only truth now. Two people, standing side by side, bound not by obligation but by trust, courage, and connection. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the trials lift from her shoulders. The journey had changed her, made her stronger, more aware of her power, and more certain of her heart. She realized that fear had never been her enemy, hesitation had never been the foe. It had been doubt, doubt in herself, doubt in the bond, doubt in the choices that had led her here. And now those doubts were gone, replaced by clarity and quiet confidence. Kale's hand brushed hers and she looked up at him, seeing not just the Alpha King, but the man beneath, the one who had carried centuries of duty, loneliness, and the weight of prophecy. She saw the vulnerability he had hidden so carefully, the longing he had tried to deny, and the courage he had demanded of her. "You are not alone anymore," Kale said softly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Lyra nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I know," she replied, "and I trust you, not as king, not as Alpha, but as someone who has walked beside me through every shadow and trial." The citadel's gates opened outward, revealing the night sky beyond. Moonlight spilled across the landscape, touching forests, rivers, and distant mountains. Lyra felt the kingdom breathing around her, alive and free for the first time in centuries. The bond broken in the ceremonial hall had been reforged, stronger and purer than before, tempered by fire, courage, and trust. As they stepped out together, Lyra realized that the trials had not only tested her heart, they had transformed it. She was no longer a passive player in the destiny of the kingdom. She was a force of her own making, powerful, aware, and unafraid to stand beside Kale as his equal. Kale walked beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon, yet always returning to her. "The kingdom will watch us still," he said. "The shadows have not entirely vanished and the future will always carry challenges. But we are ready. Together, we can face whatever comes." Lyra smiled faintly, feeling the same strength that had guided her through the forest and the citadel. "Then we walk forward," she said. "Not as master and subject, not as prophecy and pawn, but as equals bound by choice, courage, and something neither of us can deny." He looked at her, and for the first time there was no shadow between them. Only understanding, respect, and the quiet hum of something deeper, an unspoken connection that had survived defiance, trials, and fear. The wind stirred in the forests around them, carrying with it the soft whispers of approval, of lives freed, of shadows vanquished. Lyra and Kale stood together on the plateau, bathed in moonlight, their hands brushing, their hearts beating in quiet harmony. The kingdom was still but alive, awaiting the next dawn. And they had survived not by power alone, not by prophecy alone, but by trust, courage, and the bond they had chosen to embrace. Yet in the far distance, beyond forests and mountains, a faint glow flickered, like a heartbeat in the darkness, a reminder that the world was vast, that magic never truly slept, and that even the strongest bonds must continue to be tested. Lyra and Kale did not speak of it. They did not need to. Together they turned and walked down the plateau, their steps sure, their hearts aligned, ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in centuries, the Moonville Kingdom felt hope. The night stretched before them, quiet, endless, and full of promise.